Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of There's Got to Be a Better Way, the show where we talk about the transformative ideas and models that are emerging in our landscape of rising complexity and exponential change. If we haven't met yet, my name is Frank Spencer. I'm a principal at the Foresight Innovation and Strategic Design firm, Kedge, and I am a lead instructor at the Future School. So I had every intention of moving on to some subjects like design and speculative fiction today, and some of those things that I want to get to. But I can't help but echo back to a few weeks ago. If you go back and watch, I think it was the first show where I talked about, will data really save us all in the end? Will data save the world? And I want to really circle back around to that idea in a kind of way. And actually, some of the things that I touch on in today's show, we'll talk about some other cool things and be a launching board or springboard for us to move forward and into other topics. But I wanted to circle around still today to this idea that artificial intelligence is going to supplant the need for us as individuals, as groups, and a society to be futures thinkers. In other words, artificial intelligence will be able to do the job of thinking about the future for us while we do other things. I'm going to get back to that in just a few minutes. So I sort of wrote some notes for myself here, and we're going to talk about, I think, 3 or maybe 4 points of why I would like to tell you that artificial intelligence is amazing and what it does do. And we want to get past the hype on both ends of the spectrum, whether it's, there's nothing going on with it or there's all this amazing stuff going on with it. And we're almost at artificial general intelligence, which is not the case. But where are we in the middle with artificial intelligence? What is artificial intelligence role? And again, I know I'm not an artificial intelligence expert. And so there's a lot of people that would be able to add to this video and say amazing things, and I welcome that. But just in a general sense, where are we with artificial intelligence in terms of it being the force of thinking about the future, supplanting our need as people, as individuals, as communities, and as society to be good future thinkers? We have a moral responsibility to think about the future. Can AI do that for us? Or do we need to still be the future thinkers? Do we need to think about the future in purposeful, intentional ways? Do we need to develop the skill as a collective humanity to be future thinkers? Before I get started, I just want to say that any talk about artificial intelligence that doesn't last longer than 30 straight days is not covering all the issues of artificial intelligence. I realize that. These shows are best when they're well under 10 minutes, and I definitely want to keep this shorter than longer. So we are not going to touch on all of the points of artificial intelligence. I realize that I'm not doing that. Again, I welcome your input. So let's dive right in. So my first point is pretty simple, but very important. And that is that futures thinking, good futures research, or the more formal field of strategic foresight, isn't only data. Data is the past. It might be the immediate past. It might have been just a minute ago. But when you have numbers and when you have hard data, you're looking at anything from as far back as we've recorded right up to today. We don't really have data on tomorrow or the next day. We can say that we do, but that's really extrapolation. That's really forecasting. And foresight, futures thinking, and forecasting are not the same thing. Read a great article this past week, and it said that foresight in a very famous magazine really was the practice of gathering strong data and building stories from it. And I would say that that's not completely true. It's not completely false either. Good foresight is founded on data and research, plus imagination, vision, and intuition, not the flimsy kind, but really looking at the fields of sociology, evolutionary science, cosmology, complexity science, and on and on. So the reality is good foresight is both quantitative and qualitative. And that leads me to my next point. Point number 2, AI is really good at helping people to make good decisions in the here and now. That's exactly what we were covering on point number 1. When we crunch the data, when we can move faster with it, when we can take into consideration larger sets of numbers and data sets, then we can make better decisions in the here and now. It doesn't lend itself very well to thinking about the future. Now, right now, we've got a lot of articles circulating out in the zeitgeist that say artificial intelligence is like the brain and it's becoming intelligent and super intelligence and artificial general intelligence. And quite honestly, we're not as close to that as some of those articles that they want to get you to buy the magazines and read some amazing, crazy things about artificial intelligence. Even the name itself lends towards that. We're not really that close to that. Now, I'm not suggesting that we might not get there someday. And actually, I've got another point here to make, that even if we do get artificial intelligence being artificial general intelligence or super intelligence, that there's still a radical place for humans to be or transition to or evolve to be future thinkers. But the truth of the matter is, artificial intelligence is really good at crunching numbers, not at complexity, in the sense of allowing complexity to be diverse instead of simplifying it. Very important point here, that we have largely looked, because of the models that we've laid out before us in the industrial age, as complexity as being the enemy. I think I mentioned this on the first episode, still important to go over again briefly, and that is the idea that complexity is actually the natural order of things. Complexity, when complexity grows, it shows that systems are maturing, that they're growing up. When we grow up, we don't become more simple, we become more complex. Think about the human body itself. It's a complex ecosystem, and it looks, because of our metaphors, like it's gotten all simplified. It hasn't been simplified. It hasn't been boiled down to one cell or one atom. It's actually a great representation of a complex system producing something else, a sweet spot in between. One and one don't equal two in this data set. One and one equals something else. Complexity breeds creativity, and diversity breeds creativity. Simplifying diversity, simplifying complexity, that's what AI wants to do. It's not really good at saying complexity is something more than crunching the numbers or simplifying to understand what might come of that. And that actually takes me to my third point. Point number 3. There are some people today that are saying that AI and machine learning is getting better and better at discovering novelty. Because when we think about futures thinking and when we think about foresight, we don't want to just look at things that are very close in, where forecasting does a good job. And by the way, it doesn't do as great a job as it used to. There's got to be a better way. It used to be that forecasting might last for months or years, and we could extrapolate out. In this environment of greater complexity, exponential change, exponential growth, we're seeing that time span grow shorter and shorter and shorter and be reduced. So forecasting is not nearly as effective as it was before. Even in those short time frames, we need to think less probabilistic, and we need to think more constructivistic. I'll explain what that means in just a minute. So AI doesn't really see novelty in terms of short, mid, and long term. Because today, if we don't think more provocatively, if we don't think more ridiculous, then we aren't really going to be able to see what's on the horizon. We're only looking at what's right in front of us. In an environment of exponential complexity and rapid change, that kind of looking at what's right in front of us is not going to prepare us for the disruption, the transformation that's quite honestly not just coming at us, but that is needed in today's environment. So to make a long and difficult idea really short and sort of boil it down, I don't like doing that very much. Let's think about for a second this idea of epistemological uncertainty versus ontological unpredictability. Fancy words. What the difference is between those two things is epistemological uncertainty is the idea that if I just have enough information, what does this sound like? That I'll be able to understand what's coming next. But the honest to goodness truth is that when we study complexity science, evolutionary science, when we look at sociology, when we look at some of the other sciences, not just data science, then we understand, combining those two things together, that it's not enough just to gather as much information as we possibly can to understand what is going to be next. That's epistemological uncertainty. I'm just uncertain about what's happened. Give me more information, more data. I will produce something out of it and understand what's coming. Ontological unpredictability, and by the way, this comes from, I think you heard me on the first episode, these terms are ideas that we like to talk about at the Future School at Kedge all the time, but these terms themselves come from futurist Aoka Tuomi. And what he says about ontological unpredictability is that the nature of things is changing in such a way that we cannot make predictions about them. Now, I know a lot of people might be listening to this and saying, well, what's the purpose of futurist thinking at all? Well, exactly, that is the purpose of futurist thinking. When we go outside of those data sets, even data sets that contain all of the data in the whole world, and we start thinking about the emergence of patterns of true novelty, not the novelty of here is A plus B, what might C be, but here is A and B and C, what does that mean potentially that Z could be? That really tells us about disruption, transformation, which is something that we need to be talking about more than disruption, in my honest opinion. And we talk about that a lot at Kedge in the Future School. Come to the Future School, you hear all about that. And so that really leads me to my fourth point. Even if you think, by the way, that AI can see novelty past forecasting, it certainly doesn't help us to be ontologically unpredictable in our futures thinking and look at those things that aren't just right in front of us, or with all the data sets together, help us to realize, what might be next. AI does not do a good job of that. It's a decision-making tool. And that leads me to my fourth and final point. Point number 4, and this might be my favorite one. It's probably the most fun today because it actually requires, in and of itself, a little bit of good futures thinking. So let's imagine for a moment that artificial intelligence, super intelligence, artificial general intelligence actually gets to the place where all of my previous points, 1, 2, and 3, are washed away, and it is actually thinking about the future in novel ways for us, in truly novel ways for us, not forecasted novel ways, but ontologically novel ways. We really have to stop thinking about, and I'm just adding this in before I get to my point number 4, we really have to stop thinking about the future, and futures thinking is only being something that's recursive or reductive. What do I mean by that? Well, or reflexive even. And what do I mean by those 3 R words, reductive, recursive, reflexive? Well, when we think about moving up the ladder of futures thinking and we get to these ideas, or we make assumptions about the future, then we start building stories about the future and how that could be. In recursive loops, we're really just dishing out over and over, or we're looping over and over again those ideas that already play very well with us. And those are those futures that are to us very probable. And those are the ones that probably AI doesn't do too bad of a job with. That's really not good futures thinking, quite honestly. It could tell us something about where we are in the next several months or maybe even year, but it doesn't do a good job at helping us to be disruptive and transformative and truly ready for the future, whatever futures unfold. It doesn't help us to be multi-thinkers or thinking multi-strategy or multi-innovation. It doesn't help us to be good simultaneous multiple type thinkers. What is a reflexive loop? That is, once we build this ladder up and we try to become a little bit more novel, we still can get into this idea of dominant narratives. Those narratives that seem to really make sense of the world that we're in, when quite honestly, we're in an environment, and have been, I would argue, for a long time, longer than most people want to even acknowledge, maybe the last century, maybe even longer, but definitely today, where things are changing in, again, as according to my previous point that I made, more ontologically, the nature of things are changing, more just than the information of things are changing. So we really have to stop thinking in recursive, reductive, and reflexive loops. We need to really think beyond. So let's say for a moment that machines are able to do that. This is my 4th point. Interesting, right? Because then what will we do as humans? Will we just sit back and drink Mai Tais on the beach and write poems and let the machines do all the thinking for us? Sounds pretty actually awesome if I don't say so myself. Drinking Mai Tais on the beach every day, who doesn't want to do that? But honestly, that's an environment in which we, as individuals and as collective humanity, would need to have futures thinking in our hands even more. Why? Because it is a moral imperative for us as humans to think about the future. And the future is about humanity. The future is not about artificial intelligence. The future is not about energy. The future is not about technology. The future is not about the environment. I know this is heresy. The future, of course, contains all these things, and those are very important to our future. But the future is about people and how we will make or misuse or use correctly technology and all those other things I talked about as well, right? So the future does contain all those things. We have to think about those things to have a good and transformative and aspirational future, but the future is about people. And so if machines are able to think about all these novelties for us, and we don't feel like we really need to be futures thinkers anymore, the honest goodness truth is that's when futures thinking and foresight becomes even more important, because now we have to think ethically about how those machines help us to evolve, how they ought to evolve, what rights they should have, how we should interact with one another. We need to think about what we will be doing as a humanity, because quite honestly, it's really lazy for us to think that we're going to sit around the beach drinking Mai Tais and we're going to stop doing anything, because humans are creators. We're explorers. We're discoverers. And so how will we discover? What will we discover? What is there out there? We'll need futures thinking even more than we do today. I hope this helps a lot. I'm excited about our future as humanity, finding better ways, more transformative ways and ideas and models to help us to continue to evolve as humanity. I hope you enjoyed today's rant that I had on artificial intelligence and futures thinking. But quite honestly, let's move on and start talking about some other ways, even jumping off of point number 4, that will help us to think about what does futures thinking look like and how can we be better futures thinkers and what are new models for energy and for the technology, but also for the environment and the planet and business. I hope you tune into the next episode. I will see you then. Until then, there's got to be a better way.